What I did about almost 3 years ago, I came up with a presentation that I thought, hey, this captures what I do as far as running a startup, what made me successful, kind of insights, and I thought it was pretty good. I believe I have what's the closest for me as a repeatable process. And the only reason you have a repeatable process is just to make your chances of success that much better. And probably I'm more process oriented because most people know me from the last 5 years, which I've done 3 startups. Again, Avamar ended up at EMC. Virtual Iron, which ended up with Oracle, and StoreWise, which ended up in IBM this August. But most people know me from that, but my career before that was more larger companies and how you deal with it. So the title of this particular presentation is, I'll say, winning with 20% of the data, because I think it captures it. What happens in a larger company, we had a lot of data. We could make decisions, and we had decision-making frameworks and methodologies to make decisions. I had data as a manufacturer about historical down to the gnat's eyelash. I knew exactly what boards, what components, down to what regions, what protocols, and what partners. And I had that down across for years, per quarter, per month. And I could literally tell you what's going to happen in the next 18 months with a fair amount of certainty. Because, well, we had to. We had to build things, we had to design things, we had to engineer things to do that. You had to, but you had the data. You probably had 90% of the data. Well, what's opposite in the startup or emerging markets is there is no data. Maybe you're working with 20% of the data. So how do you have a repeatable process? How do you have a framework or methodology to use 20% of the data but have a reasonable chance of success and make it repeatable? I'll tell you what I've come up with. In the presentation, I kind of broke it down as talk about the opportunity. How do I think through? What's the framework when I'm thinking through what opportunity to jump into? And this is, again, from a context of a CEO coming to an existing VC-based startup and helping out. Next thing is the team. It's hard to talk about startup without talking technology, but you got to talk about the team and the DNA and the chemistry that you build out. The first 90 days is critical. In fact, VC community makes a big issue of first-time CEO. Oh. Well, because there's a lot of risk around it, because that person may or may not be able to convert into the startup world, back to the 20% versus 80% data. But I have a very specific methodology I do to go in and literally the first 90 days, how do you have impact? How do you meet the crossover points? Are you adding more than subtracting from the environment? How do you help the organization get closer to that inflection point? So again, for 3 times in a row, I've done the exact same methodology. Very different situations, but I want to share it with you as far as a framework, if you would. Talk a little bit about money, cash efficiency, and a couple stories. Talk about the ecosystem, partnerships, and how to have a strategy. And then everyone always wants to talk about acquisitions. How do you transact that company? And I think what you have to do is the steps beforehand to have a successful out. But I will talk about the specifics as far as the acquisitions and the people that I call a little bit of a dating game. And I have a small section on once you get acquired, how do you get your good technology and good teams through the knothole? And also, if you're going to be a repeatable in my market, there's only a couple companies that can buy companies for hundreds of millions of dollars. So you know you have to deal with that ecosystem. If what they bought from you successful in the past, that makes a better calling card. So you have to make sure it's successful. So I have some methodology how to do that as far as common language and culture, which I'll share with you. And then what I'll do is I'll sprinkle in just kind of the last 3 examples. I'll sprinkle in some of those stories into this methodology. You get a feel for it.